Hey y'all, Kelly Whitney here with another thing older black women should tell younger black women but don't. Learn to accept people for who they are. Today I went on a silent walk. This was my girlfriend Sabrina inviting me to an outside event. This woman led a group of people on a walk through a park in Chicago and we couldn't talk. We had to be silent. She set out a meditation prompt before we went on the walk. We only walked for like a mile and for the most part we stayed on the path. There was one moment where we went across the field. It was very obviously not designated for hikers or walkers or runners because there was no path. It was just wide open space, wet grass, etc. Back here was not a fan because I was wearing Crocs and bare feet. So my feet got wet and dirty. My Crocs got filthy. So I was not thrilled. After it was over, we sat down and we talked about our experience out on the walk and how it felt to be completely silent. That didn't bother me a bit. It didn't bother me to not speak. It didn't bother me at all. I didn't find it uncomfortable, nothing. The only thing that bugged me was getting my feet wet and dirty. But afterwards, Sabrina and I went out to breakfast and we talked some more about the experience. But then, as always with her and I, we began to talk about the past and we talked about different things that have happened in our lives and how they've shaped us. For some reason, I got this idea in my head around acceptance and just being able to say, okay. And I've always been like this. I've never been someone who would try to change other people or be overly judgmental about other people with the intention of forcing them to conform to a set standard of behavior. I don't think that's right. As adults, we need to be more accepting of one another's differences. What you really can decide, and this is all you really have control of, is this person, how they're behaving, what they believe in, is that okay with me? You don't have the right to change anybody else. You don't have the right to demand that somebody behave a certain way. They have to make that decision for themselves, especially after the age of consent. If you don't behave that way, you bring just a ton of problems on yourself. You're constantly at odds with people. People resent you because you're trying to force them into a mold that they're not ready for or don't want to be in. You end up bitter because people aren't listening to you or because you're not getting your way. And in reality, that is selfish. You shouldn't want to force anybody to do what they don't want to do. As we sat over breakfast, I talked about this in the context of how I was raised and my desire to be a nice person, to not be unkind, because as we spoke in the circle after the walk, everybody shared a little bit about themselves and I did too. And I said, I don't spend a lot of time outside. I'm usually in my house. I'm a writer. I work remotely. Sabrina is a lot of times my connection to the outside world because she will invite me out places and then I get to be social and it's needed. I need to engage with people. Otherwise, I forget how to act. And everybody laughed. But there's a reason why I prefer my own company. And it's because throughout my childhood, I was very controlled. I was very monitored. Everything about me had to be a certain way. Everything had to be the way that my mother wanted it to be. And if it wasn't, I caught hell and I was repressed. And as a result of that, I developed a really bad temper. Really, really bad. And I've worked on it. I used to be the meanest bitch you've ever wanted to meet in your life. Oh goodness, I was so mean. It was only with some work on myself that I managed to get over it. And I think I'm still in that process. I'm a lot better than I used to be, put it like that. But I do still have tantrums sometimes. When that woman turned us off of the path onto that field, I felt my anger rising and I managed to tamp it down. I said, don't embarrass Sabrina. Don't embarrass Sabrina. I managed to control myself because it wasn't even worth that. Most of the time, emotional outbursts when you don't get your way because you can't control a situation, you're trying to force somebody to do what you want them to do and they don't, it's not worth it because you don't have that right. You see what I'm saying? Sabrina, she brings something out of me. She's a loving person. She's a very caring person and she's someone who listens, and so you can be honest and you can be yourself with her. And as I was telling her, I was controlling my temper because, I'm an inside cat and I was already outside in the damn bugs and this and that. She said, well, what do you think would have happened? I would have regressed to the old me and I don't want to be mean anymore. And for some reason, I started to cry, and just thinking about that emotion makes me emotional now. I ain't gonna cry. I ain't gonna be one of these bitches crying on the internet. In that coffee shop, in that restaurant, I cried. And Sabrina held both of my hands until I got a hold of myself. And she said, you've done some great work, girl. But I wanted to get on here and talk to y'all about it because unless you can accept people for who they are, unless you can accept yourself for who you are, you will never have peace. You will always be unsettled. You will always be aggravated. You will always be searching and striving and struggling to do something that you will never be able to do, because people only do what they want. As a Black woman, a lot of us just don't have that much power. So instead, it behooves us to learn where and when to exert our energy. Trying to control others, not a good use of your energy or time. You have got to learn to accept people for who they are. I think it was Maya Angelou who said, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. And this is that. You have to accept people for who they are, and you have to accept yourself for who you are. When you don't, you're gonna have static. You're always gonna have static. And I think that older Black women don't talk to younger Black women about this because they like to have control over you. They don't want you to have autonomy all the time because they see, well, she's too free-spirited. That's dangerous. You know, I think she might be going down the wrong path, and they want to protect you, or they want to corral you for your own good. But what they don't realize a lot of times is being stifled like that is even worse than letting you go off and try something. What being stifled for years and years did to me was give me the most horrible fucking temper. This is a temper that will make me destroy things. This is a temper that will make me damage my car. And it doesn't last long. It's like a brush fire. And it just destroys everything. And then I'm left afterwards, to clean up the aftermath. You gotta say, okay, when somebody doesn't do what you want, or you make a suggestion and they don't follow through, you gotta learn to say, okay, that's their privilege as an adult. People don't have to do what you want, and you gotta be okay with that. By the same token, they need to be okay with you doing what you want. And if they're not, get away from them. You don't have the energy or time to try to convince anybody that you're an adult and that you're gonna run it your way. If people wanna take your freedom from you, get away from them, because they don't have that right. If you accept everybody for who they are, demand that they do the same in return. That's all I wanted to talk to y'all about today. If y'all want to continue the conversation, you know I'm always in the comments. And I hope y'all come back for the next video.